Page 21, Chapter 3, The Brass Island and the Bag of Winds. At first it was just a dazzle on the horizon, a flash too bright for the eyes. Then they began to make out its shape. "Land!" cried the lookout. "No, a ship, surely. An island! A city." Aiolia was all those things. It rose out of the sea like a great inverted brass bucket, floating, bobbing, bound about with brass cliffs as high as the walls of Troy. Only a single white line of caked sea salt stained its shining, polished sides. There was not a ladder, a rung, or a foothold. As they sailed alongside, they could see their own faces, a strange sight after 10 years spent living in battle tents. While they groomed their beards and hair, Odysseus cupped his hands about his mouth and hailed the people of Aiolia. Right beside him, a wirework basket, woven in the shape of a house martin's nest, dropped down on the end of a brass chain. An arm was beckoning from the rim of the high brass wall. Without a moment's hesitation, Odysseus leapt inside. "At the first sign of trouble, push off and get well away. Polites is in command if I don't return." As he spoke, the basket was hauled up. When he reached the top, 2 hands helped him out of the basket. They were soft hands, heavy with jewels. "Welcome, welcome to Aiolia, stranger. Come dine with us and our family. Shall I fetch up your men or send food and drink down to them? The rules of hospitality command that I give you everything you need." "Your kindness does you credit, sir," said Odysseus, and introduced himself modestly enough. "Odysseus? But I have heard so much about you. Every ship that passes brings some new news of Troy and its heroes, and your name is always mentioned. But the war is over. What are you doing so far from your 3-island kingdom?" The king of Aiolia was hungry for news. He gobbled it down like food and drink, and Odysseus quickly understood why. In the dining hall, all the people of Aiolia were gathered. The king's queen, his 6 sons, 6 daughters, and a handful of servants. Like 2 teams of chessmen, they faced each other across the shiny tiled floor, and a tinkling music resounded over their heads where strings of seashells jostled in the breeze. Odysseus sent word to his men that they were in safe hands, but seeing the great shortage of chairs and the one dining table, he insisted they stay in the ships below to eat and drink all the good things King Aeolus had sent to them. How they dined! All evening and all night they ate, until the 11 black ships sat low in the water, and the sailors slept over their oars. High above there was no sleep for Odysseus. To satisfy the endless curiosity of the king, he had to recount all his exploits of bravery in the wars, all his adventures since leaving Ithaca. The ruler of this floating castle, this drifting kingdom, had never set foot on the shore of the O-Round Sea, and he lived for the gossip of sailors. Odysseus said, "You must come to Ithaca some day and let me repay your hospitality." But then the king's features froze, and all of a sudden the beautiful brass city of Aiolia seemed like a prison. "Oh, we never leave the city. We have everything we need here. I've married my sons to my daughters so that they never need leave home, and travelers like you tell us stories of the world. What more do we need? Enough. Come with me. I have a present for you." He took Odysseus by the wrist and led him through brass corridors to a steely room locked with a golden key. Inside it was a single bag fastened with 7 cords, but it was a bag such as the god Helios might have sewn out of the hides of his own cattle. A skin bag with 7 seams, neither round nor square, but writhing slightly where it lay. Something was inside it. While servants carried the bag up to the roof of Aiolia, the king explained. "Last week Zeus the Almighty, father of all the gods, quarreled with Poseidon the sea god. To punish him, Zeus confiscated from him the 8 winds of the world, and put them in my safekeeping for 5 days. The 5 days are up, but before I give Poseidon back his winds, why don't I lend them to you, my dear Odysseus? I shall set just one free, the soft westerly breeze that I will carry you home to Ithaca. If you keep all the rest safely penned up in the bag, they can't hold you back or endanger you with storms and rough seas." Up on the roof, he eased the cords a fraction and thrust in his arm, right up to the elbow. His clothes billowed. He was almost lifted up off the floor, but at last he pulled out a white rag of a thing, a corner of a westerly breeze. 7 servants hauled on the 7 cords to shut the bag again. "Go with my blessing, Odysseus, and with a full sail. No need to row, only to keep a straight tiller and watch out for the shoals of your homeland." Odysseus was lowered down with the bag into his own ship, where he found his men struggling to raise the sails and catch the favorable breezes. "No hurry, men. There's plenty to carry us all the way home. Stand away from the tiller. I mean to steer this little fleet of ours all the way into the harbor below Pelicata Palace." "What's in the bag, Captain?" "Treasure," declared Odysseus delightedly. "The best present any host could have given to a wary traveler. Nobody touch it, you hear?" And foolishly, that was all he said. He stood at the tiller with one foot resting on the wriggling bag of winds, and he looked into the distance, thinking of his wife and his little son and his three-island home. The royal family of Aiolia waved from the parapets of their brass home, a lonely sight for all their wealth, drifting forever in the heart of the sea. Soon Aiolia was nothing but a flash too bright for the eye, away from the distant horizon. "What is it, do you suppose?" whispered Eurylochus to the man alongside him. The man shrugged. "He said it was treasure, and we're not to lay hands on it. That's how kings share their winnings, is it? No wonder he left us down on the ships while he went up to that brass treasure chest of a place. The king gave him some gold or jewels or some such, and he's keeping it to himself. 10 years we fought alongside him, and this is how he repays us. Look at him. He won't even take his foot off that sack." Again the man behind Eurylochus shrugged. Then, resting his forehead on his arms, he went to sleep across his oar. But for 10 days and nights Eurylochus kept wondering, kept asking his unanswerable questions of the men around him. He did not dare to ask Odysseus outright. There was a better way to find out the truth. He had only to wait, and Odysseus would fall asleep. Night and day he stood at the tiller with his foot on the sack, and would not leave it even to snatch an hour's rest. The rest of the crews were well rested, however, when the hills of wooded Xanthe came into view, and seaweed off the beaches of Cephalonia and Ithaca itself drifted by. People on the foreshore mending nets shielded their eyes and looked out to the sea at the approaching ships. Then Odysseus felt safe at last. "Someone take this tiller. I must sleep. I can't stay awake another moment." Eurylochus leapt the length of the boat, all smiles, all helpfulness. "Let me, Captain." He took the tiller and watched Odysseus curl up against the cowhide flank of the bag. And while the other men were standing up, exclaiming and pointing out the familiar landmarks of home, Eurylochus eased just one of the 7 fastening cords beside Odysseus's sleeping head. The people on the shore rubbed their eyes. They thought they had spotted a fleet of black ships, but now there was nothing but a funnel of water gouged out of the sea like the core of an apple. Above it, the sky filled with rain clouds, and the whole plain of the ocean was crumpled into mountainous waves. Spray blanked out the horizon. The 11 black ships, like splintered shards, spun away through the mist, driven hither and thither. Odysseus was thrown off the bag as the winds inside it writhed free. Eurylochus was bowled heels over head to the very prow of the ship and left clinging to the figurehead. The cockerel was buffeted high into the air, and the oars were wrenched about like the legs of a dying insect, as the fleet was driven at the mercy of 8 winds. The hot south wind burned their skin, and the cold north wind froze their hands to the ropes as they fought to save the masts. The ripped sails enveloped men like shrouds and carried them over the sides. As in the siege of Troy, the warrior Achilles killed Prince Hector and dragged him by the heels, behind a chariot, 3 times around the walls of Troy. So the winds dragged Odysseus's fleet 3 times round the ocean. Somewhere in the darkness below, Poseidon, the sea god, felt his powers restored to him. He plucked up his 8 winds, replaced them in his quiver, and said, "Now listen, Polyphemus, my ugly son, and hear the first note of my revenge on Odysseus." And his hand, knotted with veins of purple water, took hold of the spinning fleet and hurled it, where? Against the brass walls of Aiolia. Like hammers against a gong, the ships struck 11 against the towering brazen walls, and the men were jolted against their own horrified reflections. Their sweating hands made greasy prints on the yellow metal. Their panting breath slubbered in the shine, and fists beat, clang, 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 on the impenetrable walls, and brought the royal family to peer down from the roof. Odysseus called up, "Lower a basket and let me tell you the foolishness that brought us back here. Give us shelter in your friendly home." A golden coin struck him in his upturned face, and the others hit the men around him and made them cry out. "Get away, Odysseus of Ithaca," came the reply. "Get away from my spotless kingdom before the gods mistake me for a friend of yours. It's plain to me that you have offended the immortals. You have a smell in the nose of heaven that must be sneezed away. I am a God-fearing man. My wife and children are God-fearing people. I won't help an enemy of the gods. I won't. Now get away. Let go." And coins and sharp-cut jewels rained down in their faces and drove them down between the shelter of their benches. The 11 ships drifted unsteered, rolling in the swell. On the bottom boards of the boats, 500 and more men prayed to Athena, goddess of war, to Helios, the god of the sun, to Hera, the mother of the gods, and to Zeus the Almighty himself. They did not pray to Poseidon, for in their heart of hearts they knew that his back was turned on them. When they first saw the curving bays of Laestrygonia reach out to them like welcoming arms, Odysseus believed that their prayers had been answered. 2 curving headlands circled a natural lagoon of green water so clear that fishing pots were visible several fathoms below on the sand. The entrance was so narrow that the ships went in single file, and Odysseus tied his own by a single rope just outside. The ships already berthed in the lagoon were marvelous. They made the Greek fleet look like children's canoes. Odysseus was so intrigued that he walked the length of the spit with his eyes fastened on them and bumped into a tree. It was a brown tree, with fine blonde hair coating the trunk, and roots which splayed out in only one direction and ended in... "Toes?" said Odysseus, and looked up. A jolly, smiling girl leaned down and picked him up in the palm of her hand. She examined him on all sides, lifting his tunic with one finger to delight in his miniature underwear. Taking the end of her blonde plait, she brushed him down with it, still beaming with joy. "Look, mother! Look what I've found! There are lots!" Gathering up as many Greeks as she could carry, she ran along the harbor promenade, with them cradled in one arm like so many peg dolls. She beckoned the others to follow. "Come along, little ones," she called, and clucked and whistled and made little kissing noises as if to encourage them. They followed, spellbound with horror, and because their captain was tucked snug in the crook of her elbow. Her mother was equally pleased to see the visitors. She dwarfed her daughter, and her voice was as loud as a landslide. "Wait till your father sees who you've brought to dinner, my darling dear." Her husband, King Lamas of Laestrygonia, dwarfed his little wife, and ships far out to sea thought that his white hair was snow on the mountains. They mistook his palace for a mountain range, for its buttress walls reached so high that eagles nested in the eaves and clouds billowed like curtains in the arching attic windows. He was delighted by the guests his daughter had brought home to dinner, for King Lamas and all his Laestrygonians were cannibals. With great good humor he crammed 2 sailors into his mouth and crunched on their bones, and picked the leather clothing from between his teeth. Odysseus, driving his short sword into the elbow of the giant princess, heard her squeal and found himself plunging to the ground. Once there, he picked himself up and ran, leaping, zigzagging, somersaulting down the palace steps and on to the harbor promenade. As vulnerable and small as ants, he and his men swarmed back towards their ships, dodging and ducking the scooping fists of the giants. Somewhere in the belfry of the palace, an alarm bell began to clang, and out of houses high as hills came all the citizens of Laestrygonia. A cheerful, smiling people they were, with ruddy faces, thanks to their meaty diet. A harvest of 500 men was a rare treat, though even for them, a harvest festival of flesh. They stamped and ate and scooped and ate and fished with their hands into the clear water to scoop out those that escaped them on dry land. It was like ducking for apples. The Laestrygonians laughed out loud at the sport, even though their mouths were full. Some of the laughable little men even managed to reach their ridiculous little boats, and axe the mooring ropes, as if they might escape to sea. How absurd! The Laestrygonians merely took the boat prows in finger and thumb, and twisted them over, tipping men and oars and amphoras and sheep, storm-broken rigging and Trojan treasure into the clear green water. Then it was an easy matter with tridents and throwing harpoons to fish for the tender little oddities. They ate them raw, with only salt seawater for seasoning. King Lamas was the first to notice the column of fleet-footed creatures running along the headland to the mouth of the harbor. He waded into the water, pointing. His citizens and subjects went after Odysseus and the 50 others who were heading for the harbor mouth. One or two of the stragglers were picked off with harpoons, and each success was greeted with cheers from all sides of the lagoon. But a vexing number reached the tip of the mole and leapt off of it to the outer sea. Too late, King Lamas saw that a single ship was moored outside the lagoon, and that the creatures had jumped into it and were already bent over their foolish little oars. Odysseus slashed the bowline with his sword, and the fast ship leapt through the swell with such a jerk that he lost his footing and sprawled on the deck. As he did so, a Laestrygonian trident flew over his head and impaled the first oarman. "The gods forgive me," said Odysseus softly. "One ship left out of 12. We are cursed indeed."